So start by getting a lightweight, stretchy fabric. I chose one of my skin tone, but this also comes in blues and greens and all kinds of bright colors, so you can do any twi'lek really. And this is a really nice fabric because it's very light. So start by measuring the circumference of your head. And since this material is stretchy, I'm just using the circumference of my head with no excess. And then you want to measure to the top of your head and cut up that on your fabric. And then just keep cutting all the way down so that it's as long as the circumference of your head. Fold it in half and then cut it in a dome shape at that highest point where you measured the top of your head. I'm going to cut off a little bit there so it's not cone-headed, and then just sew around the edges and flip it right side out. And so then I just ended up shoving all my hair on top of my head and sticking the little hat on over that. Still kind of got a cone head thing going on here, but I'll fix that later. Then the edges and the center seam will get covered up by some brown fabric, so it's a little shorter than I need it to be because I'm going to put the fabric on later. So I took this, it's just a polyester, but it kind of looks like fake leather because it's distressed on the front of it. Flipped it around backwards and put some glue on the edges so that the edges wouldn't be raw, so they'd have a nice finished look. And then I just glued that down the center seam of the little hat here. All the way down it, trying to keep it as smooth as possible. So there it is once I've got it covering the entire seam. Then I do have a template for this. This is for the hat, so cut these two pieces out of some Pellon or craft foam, and then cut matching pieces out of some of that brown fabric, a little bit bigger than the Pellon. And then I just put glue along the edges and folded those around the Pellon. When you get to the side with the curves, you'll have to make little cuts so you can fold it in pieces like that. And I didn't do any excess on the top flat part because that will be hidden anyway. But that's what it looks like on the front and the back. Again, I didn't put any along the top edge. So you want to do that to both of them. And then put the hat on and measure about where they need to sit on the hat at the right angle. Put some pins in where they need to sit. One on each side, of course. Get kind of a medieval clergyman thing going here. And then just sew them on all the way down the little ear flap part. And you'll do that to both sides. Sewing one onto each side. And so they should sit against your face. And so then to fix the top, because it was still kind of cone-headed, I just folded the edges down and put a couple pins in it. And then I ripped that strip back off. If you do this, the folding first, you won't have to rip the strip back off, but glued it back down over the fold and sewed where the pins were, which will be covered up later. So then I took some more of that brown fabric and I made a strip that was 1 inch longer than my head. And I kind of pinned in place where it needed to be on the hat to make sure that it would cover my forehead, because again, the hat's a little short. And so I put the fabric a little farther than that pin, wrong side, facing outward. And then you just want to sew all the way around that, making sure to stretch the base fabric a little bit since you have to account for the extra inch in the brown. And then in the back, just sew the two ends closed there. And then just fold it back down around the hat. And that'll hide the bottom of the hat. And so then you want to scrunch up the edges. I put a little pin in place for my scrunches so I knew where they were going to sit. And then just take some glue and glue those scrunches in place all the way around the hat. They do not have to be one single line. You can do like multiple scrunches, as I did here. So then put the hat back on and figure out where the ear cones need to sit. Poke a hole right through where the center of it should be. And then draw a circle around that. About a 1 inch circle. This is in the template as well. And so just cut that out of the Pellon layer only. Don't cut through the brown part yet, because when you cut through the brown part, you just want to cut little slits all the way around. So you got like 6 little triangles. And you're just going to take those and glue those and flip those toward the inside So that gives the whole a nice clean look. You don't see any raw edges then. And obviously do that to both of the flaps. So here's what the little hat's looking like. So for the cones themselves, cut these shapes out. These are in the template as well. You want to fold from the flat edge, and that will make you a perfect little cone. I stuffed it with a little bit of that Christmas Village snow batting. A little bit of glue around the bottom edge, and stick it onto another piece of fabric to hold the stuffing in place. So when those are dry, just cut them out, leaving a little bit of extra fabric around the cone. Put a little bit of glue around the edge of the hole in the hat, and shove those little ear cones right through there. And the excess fabric will help it stick to the flap. Just like that. Do that to both sides, of course. And I put the seams on the bottom so that you wouldn't really see the seams in the ear cones. Just put a little more brown fabric on the inside to cover those. So for the Lekku themselves, I cut this shape out of some of that lovely fabric from the beginning, and I cut a second piece. The shape is also in the template. You just want to sew all the way around except leaving the very end open. So here it is after I've sewn it. Then of course just flip it right side out. You might have to use a pencil or something to flip it right side out. Once you got it, just stuff it with some of that Christmas snow batting. Yes, I know what this looks like. Shut up. And then when you stuff it, you want to make sure that it's not too tight, otherwise it'll get heavy. You want it just enough to be full, and you'll barely see the seam line in this fabric. That's why I love this fabric so much. So then just take an excess piece of fabric and sew it onto the edge where the stuffing is, so that the stuffing will stay in place there. Just sew it all the way around that hole. Make sure nothing of the stuffing falls out. So there it is once I've got it sewn, and then just cut off the excess so that you don't see anything hanging down there. And so then you'll take your Lekku, your lek, and you want to cover up the seam line in the hat with that. You just stick that in place and then just sew it in place. It's actually very difficult to sew these to the hat because they're kind of awkward. So what I ended up doing was sticking a pan on a chair and sticking the hat on that, and then letting the lek trail off of it over the chair so I could easily sew all the way around without it being a pain. So once you've got it sewn on, take another brown strip. You want to wrap that around the base of the lek, and then you'll take a long strip and you're going to wrap that all the way around, gluing it on a little bit at a time. And again, I'm doing this over the chair because it's so much easier than trying to do it when it's laying flat on the ground. So once you reach the bottom, then you'll take another piece and come back the other direction, crisscrossing the first ones you put on. Again, I'm not sewing any of these on, I'm just gluing on all of the fake leather stripping here. And just going all the way up until I reach back at the top and cut it off. And so then here it is once I've got both of them all wrapped. You can barely see the seam lines on the tops of these. You can see them if you look, but they're really not that noticeable, which is a pretty nice thing. So then I took one more strip of brown fabric, put some sticky back Velcro on the back and the corresponding pieces on the inside so it will Velcro right under my chin. You could also use snaps if you want something a little more secure. But so here are the finished set of Lekku, and obviously they don't look as good as latex Lekku, but you know, for $10 these are pretty good, and they're nice and flexible, so you can wrap them around, you know, the one around the neck like they do. So they're nice for $10, not bad.